Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 349. We had a little Packer news dump on Friday. Remember on Friday when I said, what's going on? That would be my first question for Ed Policy. Just open-ended. What's going on? What's going on about what, John? Anything. Tell me something about anything. We talked about Rich Bisaccia stepping down, and we don't really have any backstory other than what Goody gave us at the Scouting Combine, that it was a surprise. Surprise, Clark? They were surprised that he stepped down, especially given how long it came after the season had ended. But then on Friday, we talked about, not only do I want to know more about what happened there, what is going on with the hiring process? Have we interviewed anybody? Is this just something you can apply for on monster.com? I don't know why that popped into my head. Is that even still a website? Monster.com. Wow, what a time to be alive that was. But it's probably spammed to all hell now. But that used to be the site. But what are we doing? Are we interviewing people? Do we have people coming through 1265 that are sitting down and they're going over credentials and they've got a list of candidates? We don't know. And they hired somebody. It's so weird that it's a Friday news dump. They released the name of Cam Aychord is how you say his name, I think. I've seen a lot of different pronunciations. Cam Accord, Cam Aychord, I've heard. And the one that is on Google as the phonetic pronunciation is Cam Aychord. But they announced that on Friday he is going to be the next special teams coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. He's 39 years old. He was the special teams coach in New England from 2020 through 23. He's been the assistant to the special teams coach in New York with the Giants for the last couple of years. That's where he comes from. Again, 39 years old, Cam Aychord. But a weird news dump on a Friday. So we'll talk a little bit about that and his background. We'll also talk about Jimmy Garoppolo as the new handsome backup quarterback for the Packers. Are we just going to start an all-handsome team? I guess, according to Jeremy Fowler, the Packers could be in the mix there, assuming they lose Malik Willis, which they're going to. They're going to be in search of a backup quarterback, and at this point in his career, Jimmy Garoppolo is a pretty good backup quarterback that has won a lot of NFL games. He had been backing up in L.A. He is going to be a free agent. Could Green Bay be a landing spot for him? We'll discuss that. We'll talk a little Badger basketball, and we'll talk about the Bucs game yesterday. This is the worst. This team is the worst. This is the worst experience I've had. And we've had 13 win years or 15 win years in 2013. We've had a lot of the Herb Cole Bucks, which this kind of feels like where they're battling for the last spot in the playoffs, but you know they're not going to do anything and they're not true contenders. We've lived a lot of different lives as Bucks fans, but this feels like the worst because now they've lost 2 games. Lost on Friday to New York, whatever, that's fine. They're a really good team. That's fine to lose that game. But then yesterday, one of the most awful displays of shooting I have seen in a quarter in NBA history in my life, of all the games, all the NBA games I've watched, not just Bucks games, of all of the NBA games I've watched in my life, one of the worst shooting quarters, one of the worst offensive performances in a quarter I have ever seen. It'd make your eyes bleed. They need to Clockwork Orange you to watch that quarter over again. Just pry your eyes open to watch it. They score 8 points in the fourth quarter. They lose by 23 to the Bulls, a team that was on an 11-game losing streak that is actively tanking, making no illusions about it. The Bucks lost that game. So now are we back in a tank mode? I don't know what to make of this team. This has been terrible. This has been a terrible year. We'll hit on some Badger basketball, too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. Hit time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, face into center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win.
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's complete intercepted. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul. A pinnacle ball throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there. And they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Welcome in Monday morning edition. Appreciate you joining us here. Like and subscribe and give us a rating, please, if you can. And also don't forget the email is strangebrewpod@aol.com. I think we're going to have another mailbag episode at the end of this month. This is a wonky month for me. We talked about this on Friday. I'm still not entirely sure what we're going to be doing for our second podcast this week. It is the St. Jude Radiothon. I just got out of a half an hour meeting, so the podcast dropping a little late today. I had a sales call I had to go on, and then we had the St. Jude meeting this last half an hour. It was exactly what I expected it to be. This is my 19th year doing this. So at this point, it's pretty turnkey. I know exactly what the procedure is, but you want to be in the meeting just in case something comes up. And then, of course, when they ask for a Q&A at the end of it, we've got 15 people hopping in there, the type of people that would click reply all on a company email asking questions that don't need to have answers and just throw it in 2 cents we didn't need. But we've got that on Thursday and Friday, trying to raise as much money as we can to help the kids at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis battle childhood cancer. So that is going to throw the end of the week off. My feeling is we're probably going to have a Wednesday podcast. I am also, as a side note, done predicting how long these podcasts are going to be. I believe I now have a perfect record in starting the podcast by saying this is going to be a shorter podcast, and then subconsciously my brain says, oh yeah? Challenge accepted. And then we do the longest podcast that we have ever done. I'm done predicting that, although I would think Wednesday is going to be shorter, but I'm not saying that. That's an unofficial statement on the Wednesday podcast, but I think that's likely when it's going to be. There will be a second podcast this week. I'll give you that. I'm not sure what day or what time it's going to drop. There will be a second podcast this week. There will be no podcast next week. I am down in Phoenix with my wife. We're doing spring training. 1 week from today, I am going to be waking up, and it's going to be 65 degrees outside, and I am going to be going to a Brewer baseball game in like 2 hours. I cannot wait for this moment. But there will be no podcast next week, but there will be a second pod at some point this week. Before we hop into some stuff here, just because we've turned the calendar. I know I played this on Friday. The calendar has flipped to March. College basketball, NCAA tournament, baseball this month. Weather's getting warmer. Arby's milkshakes, all the great stuff that comes with spring. But as soon as you flip that calendar, I saw it all over Twitter yesterday. People had put together all sorts of March Madness collaborations. This is March. I feel like we had to play the March Madness theme. Before we get into some Packer news here this morning, just a couple of things. Let me just move this over here. Hold on. I got to get my workstation organized here. I have just wrapped up eating too. I was eating this during the St. Jude meeting. We have one of the nice parts of working in radio. There's a lot of stuff. The pay is bad and the hours are horrible. So we got that going. But I've been doing this now for almost 20 years. This October is going to be my 20th year in this building. Not my 20th year on B93. I think this is my 19th. I'm a year behind because I started on HBL in our building, and then eventually I made my way to B93. But this October will be my 20th year. The thing is, if you've been doing this for a long time, you do form connections with a lot of our listeners out there. We have a lot of regulars that listen to every morning show. God bless them. I don't even listen to every morning show. I don't care for the host. I find him a bit pretentious. I think he thinks he's funnier than he really is. But they have listened to every show for as long as we've been doing this. And you form those connections. And I know a lot of them on a first-name basis. I've been to weddings. I've been to funerals. I mean, I've been to, when you make that kind of connection with somebody, you do that kind of stuff when you work in radio. Another nicety of this is that we get baked goods from some of the listeners out there who are especially good with that kind of stuff. They will drop off, I'm making cookies. You know what? We'll throw a batch over to B93. And this has happened my entire career here. I love it. We have a lady by the name of Gail who sends us cream puffs. She makes homemade, like, State Fair-esque cream puffs, except they're better than State Fair cream puffs. And anytime the Packers suffer heartbreak, which thankfully for my cream puff consumption is every goddamn year, they suffer some kind of heartbreak. But then I know, like literally as the season expires, I will get a Facebook message from Gail on a B93 page that says, cream puffs tomorrow? And she just brings a tray of homemade cream puffs to help us drown our sorrows in sugar, which we love. Well, one of our longtime listeners, Nancy, stopped by today. I'd say once every few years she'll drop off her famous homemade rum cake. I am a huge advocate of rum cake. And I'm telling you, Nancy warns you, or anybody in the building, if you throw it in the break room, she will warn you when she drops it off that there is a lot of rum on here. Like, I think you could probably still drive after you have a piece or two, at least one piece. If you have two pieces and you get pulled over for speeding, there's a chance you might get a breathalyzer, so I'd be careful with that. But this rum cake is delightful.
You know what? We all love Yoo-hoo, especially Yoo-hoo with a little rum.
What's wrong?
You don't know what rum is.
Rumpelstiltskin?
My favorite moments in Big Daddy. We fade Jobu, and then there's the Major League reference, cigars and rum. But I am powered by that right now. I had a giant slice of rum cake, so if we get a little wobbly during the podcast, that's why. That's why today. I have no explanation for the other episodes. But I had a big slice of that, and she brings a side of Cedar Crest ice cream. She actually brings the ice cream, guys. I mean, this is one of the beautiful things of forming relationships with listeners. She actually brings a small pint of Cedar Crest vanilla, I think it's actually vanilla custard ice cream, because that's the best. You have to have some whipped cream or some ice cream on top of something like a rum bunt cake. Bunt. Oh, it's a cake. And it is just phenomenal. And we get it, like I said, once every few years. So this is a little bit more of a rarity, but I'm being powered by that on episode 349 here today. Really quick before we hop into the Packer, Jimmy Garoppolo and Cam Aychord, I think is how you say it. I do just want to have a follow-up email. This was actually sent to my work email, not the Strange Brew email. Don't forget, strangebrewpod@AOL.com. Any sports questions, any gambling advice. Oh, you know what I did get on the pod email? We can go over this right now. We don't have to save this for the mailbag. I had an emailer ask what our final gambling record was for the NFL season. So we were 43-39. We're not counting prop bets. That is a total. That's a different section. That's like a different section of your stomach. You know when you go out to eat and you're just shoveling food, and you've got a steak, and you've got potatoes, and you got veggies, and you're just stuffed. There's no way I could eat anything more. And then they come up to you with that dessert tray and say, could you have a dessert? Well, yeah, that's a different compartment. There are different sections in your stomach. One is for main courses. One is for bread before you get the main course. And then another one is for dessert. So the prop bets, that is a different section of my gambling stomach. We don't count that. Heading into award season, we were 43-39-3. And then, like I said, we hit on the coach of the year, who did I have as coach of the year? Vrabel. And we had two bets. We had Vrabel at 7-1 and Ben Johnson at 6-1. So obviously Vrabel's the only one that pays, so you take one off the top of the 7 because we had to pay for the Ben Johnson bet. That was not a winner. So that takes the Vrabel payback from 7-1 down to 6-1. So if you tack on the 6 and then you add the 1 to the loss column, we ended 49-40-3, up 9 units. That's not too bad, everybody. We were struggling to keep our head above water there on a week-to-week. I think, once again, a lot like last year with the Josh Allen MVP bet. I think last year we ended up about the same. I think we were 10 or 11 units up. 2 years ago, year 1 of the podcast, I'd have to go back and look. I'm almost certain we ended our year between award season and the actual week-to-week on college and NFL. I'm pretty sure we ended like 17 units up. So, it's a little Sheboygan's Country B93 podcast, but if you're into gambling, I will put my gambling record up against any of the national ESPN, whatever their pick podcast is, against Barstool, against any one of them, FanDuel, The Ringer, The Gambling Show. They're all very entertaining shows. Now, their shows may be more entertaining than this one is. I'm not saying ours is more entertaining than those are. But if you take all of the picks they make throughout the course of the year, and I'm almost certain on a lot of those podcasts, they're not giving you their record. I'm telling you what we are every single week. This is nothing if not transparent about the picks we're making when we get to NFL college football season. I will put 49-40-3. I will put that up against any of the heavy hitters, any of the sharps on any of those podcasts. There's a reason they're not giving you that record on a week-to-week basis. So in the 3 years of this pod, we have never finished worse than what I think we were this year. I think this year was the worst we've done. But again, like I said, we kind of got one on Josh Allen as the MVP at I think 8 or 9-1 last year. And we got Vrabel a big hit at 7-1. Without those, we're hovering around 500. But the beauty is, we did make those picks. So we end up 9 units up. If your unit is $100 a game, you'd be up $900. If your unit is $1,000 a game or a bet, you'd be up $9,000. So that is where we ended up, 49-40-3. Now the problem with March is, where's my March Madness music again? Hold on. Now the problem with this season is, we always feel pretty good coming out of football, and then you know what's about to happen. I'm going to take that 9 units up, and I'm going to be gambling on Austin P. I'm going to be gambling on, Western Carolina or whatever the hell. I'm going to put together ridiculous, stupid parlays and teasers and all that kind of crap for the 4 days of the NCAA tournament opening weekend, and I'll lose it all. That's what we call the degenerate gambling cycle of shame. I'll take whatever we won from the NFL season, and it will be gone by the end of March. But a pretty good NFL season again. I had another email on my work email. This one is just a quick note for anybody who is my age, who is in their early 40s, probably mid to late 30s, early to mid 40s. that kind of covers the late 80s and the most of the 90s, what you would call the wax pack era of baseball, football, and basketball card trading. Last week, we had National Trading Card Day. And for trivia, we always kind of connect the daily B93 trivia question to whatever the national day is. Just easy to do that. And sometimes if we have a big actor birthday or a musician birthday, we'll do trivia revolving around that. But we did some baseball card trivia. My question, what was it? I think my question was, what is the most valuable Milwaukee Brewer trading card of all time? Of all the different Brewer cards, what is the most valuable? And the answer was, my options were Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, or Raleigh Fingers card. The answer is Robin Yount rookie card, 1975 tops. That sells, if you have it graded at a 9 or a 10, that sells for around $80,000. That is the most valuable Brewer trading card. But as we were doing trivia, revolving around that and talking about baseball cards and being a 90s kid who lived in the boom of the 80s and 90s where the market was just oversaturated with a million different trading cards and a bunch of different companies, and I lived through that. And I said on the air, like a lot of guys my age, and I'm sure there's some girls out there too, but I think a lot of guys my age have just bins and buckets and binders of trading cards from 30 years ago, and they're just sitting there in a closet somewhere, probably at your old house, which is the case for me. And what do you do with them? Is there any value there anymore? Is there any way you can make money on these? Because when I was a kid, and we talked about this on the segment, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, one of my favorite places to go was downtown Sheboygan on 8th Street. It was called Sheboygan Cards and Collectibles. And it was all baseball cards. Eventually it transitioned to Magic cards and Pokemon cards and that kind of stuff. But at that time, in the 80s and 90s, that was a baseball, basketball, football trading card place. You could buy packs, you could buy individual cards, you could buy pennants. They had signed stuff and posters. It was my favorite place on planet Earth. It had that distinctive baseball card store smell, and I don't even know what that is. It's like cardboard and stale gum, and the guy who works there probably hasn't showered in a few days. It was that combo, that sentient funk, and it just was the best. Like, if I could get a candle that smells like that, I think I'd put it in the B studio. There was just something about when you walked in, it had one of the old push doors with a dinger on the top, with a bell on the top, and then you just got that smell of, like, wax packs and card packaging and all that stuff when you walked in. And like a lot of kids in that era, I would collect. My dad would take me basically every Monday. I'd guilt him into, he picked me up from school on Mondays. That was his day, Mondays. And it would basically just take me there. We'd buy a couple packs. I'd buy a card. It was awesome. And I thought, because when I was a kid in the 90s, all of the cards from the 50s, the 40s, and 50s, and 60s, they were all worth hundreds and thousands of dollars. Like, every card from that era was worth a ton of money. So in my little brain, this could be another segment of John, You Ignorant Slut, episode 17. In my brain, and a lot of kids, I remember the guys I'd collect and trade cards with on my block on 6th Street. My buddy Chris lived on one end of the block. My buddy Tark lived on the other end of the block. And when we were kids, basically every day in summer or after school, we'd call each other, hey, you want to trade cards? And we'd go trade baseball cards. But we all thought, okay, if baseball cards from the 50s and 60s are all worth bare minimum $50 or $60, most of them are worth hundreds of dollars. Many of them are worth thousands of dollars. So extrapolate that. If I get all these cards now in 2030 and 2040 and 2050, all of these cards are going to be worth hundreds of dollars. Even the commons, even the ones that aren't worth more than a quarter now, they're all going to be worth a bunch of money. And this is how I'm going to retire. This is why I didn't start a Roth IRA until I was 35 years old. Was this baseball card collection. That's my 401k. Do you want to contribute when I was 25 years old and was hired full time? Do you want to open a retirement account with Midwest Communications? No. Why would I do that when I have two 200-pound bins of baseball cards sitting in my closet at my parents' house? What would I need this for? And eventually it became clear at some point in the early 2000s, the problem was, like we just said, the oversaturation. The reason those cards in the 40s and 50s and 60s were worth so much money is because most kids were putting them in their bicycle spokes, and they were rare. There weren't a million packs out there, and they got destroyed for a variety of reasons, and no one took care of them. So, yeah, if you had them in good condition and it was a Mickey Mantle, like Mickey Mantle, I love you, Mickey, I love you. That was the Mickey Mantle rookie card, the 1951 or 52 rookie card. Most of them probably got destroyed. But if you have one in good condition, it's worth like six figures. So when you go in that era of the 80s and 90s, there's just a billion cards out there, and we all have them. And there's nothing rare about them unless you get like the Ken Griffey rookie card, unless you get the misprints. Those are always the most valuable cards now from that era if somebody made a mistake and they had to pull them back and then reissue. I forget what the famous error card was in the early 90s. There's a couple of them where they made a mistake, so they had to pull back. I think there was a Barry Bonds rookie card where they maybe used somebody else's picture on it, and it still said Barry Bonds. Those are worth a lot of money, but I don't have any of those, of course. And now I've got these bins of cards that are worth essentially nothing, 95% of them. Now, some of them are worth money. 5% are worth some money. I've got some pretty valuable cards in that collection, but the problem is, in the baseball card collecting world, they're worth nothing until they get graded. And there are a couple of grading companies. PSA is one. There's one that starts with a B. I don't remember them. There's like 2 or 3 that are pretty well recognized in the trading card community that can grade your cards. And you have to send your cards. You have to mail them off, and you have to pay. It's like $50 a card, so you have to kind of guess, is this card going to be worth more money than it costs to get it graded? And that's hard to discern because while this card may look in mint condition to me, to the person grading it, maybe they see some different stuff on there they don't like. And if your card is not a 9 or a 10 on a 10 scale, it's worth squadoosh. It's worth basically not even the cardboard it's printed on. So you could send in a card and pay $50 or whatever it is, $40 to have it graded, and then you could get it back and it's a 7 out of 10, and you just spend $50 to get something back that's worth $1. So that is something that happens now if you're trying to make money on the cards from the 80s and 90s. And then if you do get it graded and it is worth more than what you paid to grade it, then what do you do with it? eBay, whatever. So that was my question. How do I unload myself of some of these baseball cards and make some money on them? And maybe how do I avoid the grading process? And they're gone for like months. You mail them off to PSA and you have to fill out this form. I've gotten to the point where I filled out the form and I've gotten mail like little card boxes where you can mail them off. I've gotten to that point, but I've never actually sent one off. But you send those off, and then you don't get them back for like half the year. It takes like 4 or 5 months to even get them back. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything you can check on their website to see, well, where am I in the line here? Am I ever going to get this card back, or did you just take this card and it's gone forever? But I did have somebody email me. So for those out there that may be into this information, an emailer said, John, there's a place called Brew Trading in Greenfield, and then in parentheses, Milwaukee, so close to Milwaukee, that will send out bulk shipments to PSA for you. You still have to pay, but they're much better with the turnaround, and they know what they're doing. Okay, that's a good piece of information. Brew Trading. We're not going to invoice them for ads. No free ads. Brew Trading Company in Greenfield. But maybe that's a place you can go then. You give them the cards, you pay for it, but then they handle everything, it sounds like. They handle the packaging. They send out mass shipments from a bunch of people that probably drop their cards off there, and they all come back in bulk, and they call you when it's done. So maybe that's a way to do it. I do laugh sometimes. I laugh at my 10-year-old brain because when I was going through these big storage bins of baseball trading cards, I had a filing system. I had 1 million binders with cards in them, but then I had 2 longer cases of cards, like card cases. You know what I'm talking about if you traded cards. And on the top of 2 of the cases, in masking tape, I put masking tape on the top, and then in pen on one of the containers, I wrote good cards. And then on another one, I wrote great cards. What the delineation there is, I have no idea. But basically, my entire 10-year collection of cards and and I'm telling you, you cannot pick these bins up. There is so heavy with all the cards that are in there. So of all that time and money I spent, my parents' money I spent on baseball cards, it all comes down to like 2 containers that might be worth something maybe. That's it. That's like literally 3% of the collection. But the masking tape designation of good cards and great cards. So those are the 2 I'd probably take to that, what is it called, Brewtown Trading Company, and see if we can get those graded and maybe make some money on them. All right, now that was a quick aside, but I thought that was, if you are my age, I think we have a lot of listeners on this podcast that are sort of in my age range, in their 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, that probably collected cards back in the day and probably have them sitting around somewhere and are wondering, am I just going to die with these cards? Like, what is going to happen? Then somebody else has to deal with them. Can I make money on these cards? Is there any value here? Maybe there is with that place. And there's probably more trading card places that do that, but that was what our emailer sent me. Brewtown Trading Company in Greenfield. All right, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers news dumping that we have a new special teams coach. They've been doing this a lot of the offseason with big stories, and not even necessarily stories that you would think you have to news dump. When I think of a news dump, when I think of a company or a team news dumping something on a Friday at 5 o'clock or a Friday at 4:55 when everybody's leaving and then it'll be forgotten about by Monday, typically that's some bad news. That's something where our stock went down, our CEO got arrested for a DUI. I mean, there's some bad stuff that you news dump on a Friday, and then people see it and think, oh my God, and then you forget it's the weekend, you have Friday beers, and then it's Saturday and Sunday, and by the time you get to Monday, you don't even know it. The Packers are doing that, but with stories that shouldn't have to be news dumped. Like, this feels like you could have held on to this information until Monday or Sunday night, and then leading into the week, radio stations, podcasts, sports radio stations in particular, would have this fresh news to talk about on Monday. But it was about 4 o'clock on Friday. They news dumped the hiring of a new special teams coordinator, and taking the place of Rich Bisaccia is going to be, now I think I've got this right with the pronunciation, Cam Aychord is going to be the new special teams coach in Green Bay. I have heard Accord, it's Achord. Initially, I thought Cam Accord, and then I heard somebody on a podcast over the weekend think that it was more Aychord, like Achu was how they said it, Aychord, and that doesn't sound like it'd be good to have. I don't know what it is about saying, like, Cam Aychord sounds like something you wouldn't want to be called. Aychord. I don't know what it is about the word or the way that hits, but it doesn't hit well. And then I've seen since then Cam Aychord, not Accord, Cam Aychord, like A-Y, Aychord. So he'll be the new special teams coach. Fire Aychord. That'll be the new guy everybody wants gone when we have a holding penalty on the kickoff of opening weekend in September. That'll be the guy that we want canned. How about you could call him Canned Aychord. That kind of works. So he is 39 years old. It is kind of funny. If you put a picture next to Cam Aychord and Matt LaFleur, it's almost like he hired a guy that looks exactly like him. He looks like he would be the special teams version of Matt LaFleur, just the way he looks. Because he basically looks like Matt LaFleur, except he's got a goatee. Does Matt LaFleur have a goatee? I think he does, so maybe that doesn't change. Matt LaFleur, I know his eyebrows are immaculate. Goatee. Oh, he's got a beard. So instead of the beard, Aychord has just the goatee, and he's got a visor, which to me, that is a special teams coordinator's specialty. It's almost like if you become a special teams coach, if you're an assistant to the special teams coordinator, here's your visor. I don't know of many coaches. Some do, but I don't know of many coaches, like head coaches, that just wear a visor. There's not many. But when you cut to the sideline and you see special teams coach under that person's picture, a lot of those guys have visors. So he's got the goatee and the visor. He looks a little different, like a little more chaotic version, I guess I'd say, of Matt LaFleur. It is. It looks like the special teams version, the Roundies version. What is the store brand version of Matt LaFleur? Cam Aychord is the new special teams coach. So the background is this. He was the special teams coordinator under Bill Belichick in New England from 2020 to 2023. And then when Belichick went off to date Jordan Hudson and coach in college, when he went back to school, when he had his, what's the guy's name? I can't think of it now. Rodney Dangerfield back to school. When he had his back to school moment, then Gerard Mayo did not keep Aychord on as the special teams coach after the 2023 season. So then he went to New York, and he's been the assistant special teams coach, assistant to the traveling secretary. He has been the assistant to the regional manager in New York for the Giants for the past couple of years. If you look at his resume from New England, year one was spectacular. In fact, the Patriots in that year one under Cam Aychord, they were the number one special teams unit in all of the NFL. Pretty good. Then things didn't go so well. Then they were, I think, 19th the year after that. And then they kind of just hovered in the teens after that, which, again, even though Bisaccia, I'd have to go back and look. Year one of Bisaccia was 2022. And as we discussed when he stepped down, that first year it felt like we were in the right direction because, as I said when he stepped down, most people agreed this was the guy to get. He was the most sought-after special teams coach on the market that year. It was a glaring weakness, and I mean a glaring weakness after the Mo Drayton year and that matchup against the Niners in the divisional round of the playoffs that year. and you went out and you spent money and you got the number one guy in the market. I can't think of, other than maybe a handful of people who are now lying and saying, I was never on board with Rich Bisaccia. So that's always going to happen in the social media realm of sports, where everybody's on board, and then when somebody gets fired, you get about 30% of the fan base say, well, I never. It's like the Dame Lillard trade. Everybody was on board with the Dame Lillard trade. Everybody was on board with it. 99% of the people were on board with it. And then when it went tits up, then, of course, everybody, I knew it. They should have never traded Drew Holiday, and they should have traded Chris Middleton, even though they couldn't do that, and we could rehash that whole thing. But it was one of those moves where everybody agreed on it, and then it went bad, it went sour, and now everybody's saying, I never believed in it. But you hire the guy that you felt like you had to hire in 2022, and they go from dead last in the league in 21 to, I think, middle of the pack, 17th or 18th in the league in 22. And then it just never went beyond there. That was the best that it got under Bisaccia. So if Cam Aychord, he had the number one unit in 2020, but then he's in the kind of the mid to late teens. But if he can at least keep it there, then at least we're not seeing any regression. Like, if he can make this team, I feel like I'm talking about the post-Dom Capers 2011 or 2010 defense, where we were begging in Aaron Rodgers' prime. We were begging. Why don't you put some beg into it? We were begging just for a middle-of-the-pack defense. I don't even need a top 5. I don't even need a top 10. With Aaron Rodgers, where he's at in the prime of his career, and this offense, just give me a top 15 defense. Give me a top 18 defense. And I kind of feel the same way about special teams now. Just give me give me the 15th ranked special teams unit in the league, Cam Aychord. And if you can do that consistently, you'll probably have a job here for the next 4 to 5 years. We just can't bottom out. We can't be in the lower third. We can't be in the lower half. You can't be 25th, 26th in the league, which they were a couple of years under Bisaccia. If we can just get to the middle of the pack, I feel okay about this. Can we just get to a point where special teams is not costing us playoff games? That's all I'm looking for. I don't think that's too much to ask of a unit that's only on the field like 10% of the game. But that is going to be the new special teams coach in Green Bay, Cam Aychord. And now it's another question, like we said on the last podcast, on the previous podcast, when Matt LaFleur, whenever it is that he stands in front of a microphone, and I would guess it's going to be coming before or after the draft, I think, and if it's not then we're talking about OTAs, but he's going to have a lot of questions he's got to answer. He's going to have to talk about Bisaccia, what happened there, why did it happen 38 days after the season ended, what was the impetus behind using the phrasing of stepping down, not fired, not retiring, all of that. He's going to have to probably answer questions about the report cards that we talked about last Friday, where he is now second to last in the league in terms of how he is perceived in terms of respect for the players. And then all the issues we talked about that players thought with the training equipment and the nutrition and not having babysitters to help out the family on game days. He's probably going to have to ask questions about that. And now he's going to have to answer questions about who is Cam Aychord? Why did you feel like this was the way to go? Did you interview anybody else? You know, he's going to have a lot of stuff. It's going to be a long one. I would think the Matt LaFleur press conference, we can set the over-under on, I don't know, a long press conference during the year is probably in the 20 to 25-minute range. I think you can probably set the watch for about 40 minutes for whenever that first Matt LaFleur press conference is once we get to that, either before or after the draft, or if we're waiting all the way until May. And if he waits all the way until May in OTAs, then he's going to have to answer questions about the draft pick, so then you can add another couple minutes on top of it. I think that first LaFleur presser is going to be in the 40-ish minute range whenever it is that he talks to folks. But Cam Aychord, 39 years old, the new special teams coordinator in Green Bay. And then one other quick note. So the Packers are likely to lose Malik Willis. I guess you can't say anything for certain right now because we're not to a point where he is signed with somebody else. The new league year, I think, starts, when does the new NFL league year start? So one of the best segments on the show is when you can listen to me typing out things in real time. It starts next week, Wednesday. So the legal tampering period will begin this weekend, and then the official signings will take place next Wednesday, March 11th at 3 o'clock Central Time. Good time for me to take vacation. It's a good time in the podcast world where we definitely see spikes. When there's a lot of Packer news, this podcast, and I would think every Wisconsin sports-based podcast, now obviously the Packer podcast, the Packer podcasts, the Packer podcasts, the Packer podcasts are always going to see that spike because that's all they do. But if you are doing a podcast like this one where we're trying to hit on a lot of different stuff, just a numbers game, so you definitely see spikes if there's a big Packer win, a Packer loss, the Micah Parsons trade that happened, the episode that happened the day after that. That was a big download day for us. But it's a good time to go on vacation when we get to free agent signing period, although I don't know how active the Packers are going to be. I do not feel like this is going to be one of those off seasons where they make a trade for Micah, like a player of that caliber, or like it was the second year of Goody when he signed the Smith brothers and he signed Billy Turner and he signed Adrian Amos. I don't think they're going to be flooding the market with money, but probably not the best time to be gone for an entire week and not have a podcast at all next week when the new NFL year starts and guys are going to be signing. But we assume Malik Willis, by this time next week, is probably going to have an offer during the legal tampering period, and he's probably going to be making a lot of money and at least competing for a starting job elsewhere. So then what do you do with the backup quarterback? We had that email a few weeks ago. Wasn't that on the email podcast, the mailbag episode? That was, is Desmond Ridder really going to be the backup quarterback this year? And we discussed at that time, like, hey, maybe we give Matt LaFleur. One thing I'll say about Matt LaFleur is that he has been a good developer of quarterbacks in his time in Green Bay. He resurrected Aaron Rodgers' career. Now, a lot of that is the talent of Rodgers, but let's not forget what 2017 and 2018, especially Aaron Rodgers, looked like. It looked like we were heading in a downward trajectory, and then LaFleur comes in with some innovative thoughts offensively. In 2019, Rodgers is a lot better, and then back-to-back MVP years late in his career in 2020 and 21. I don't know that we saw that coming. I don't think we saw two more MVPs coming for Rodgers. So he helped resuscitate Rodgers' career. He has developed Jordan Love into a good NFL quarterback. He developed Malik Willis into a tremendous backup quarterback, and I guess we'll find out whether or not he's going to be a good regular starter in the NFL. And Desmond Ridder is not that old. At this point, it doesn't look like he is going to be given the keys to a franchise again, but can he rehabilitate Ridder the way he rehabilitated Willis when, if we were doing a podcast in the Malik Willis the last year before he came to Green Bay, and it looked like it was not going to happen for him in Tennessee, and it looked like at that point he was never going to be a starter again, we were saying a lot of the same stuff about Malik Willis. So maybe if it is Desmond Ridder, maybe Matt LaFleur can do something with Desmond Ridder still. But you think, in all likelihood, the Packers are going to be looking for some kind of depth there and some veteran move for a backup quarterback next year. As we talked about in the Desmond Ridder conversation, unfortunately, it feels like the years of where you just knew Favre was going to start 16 games, and for the most part in Rodgers' career, outside of 13 and 17, it felt like he was going to make every start every year. It just doesn't feel like that's something you can rely on anymore in the modern-day NFL, and because teams, rightfully so, are being much more careful with injuries, specifically brain injuries, head injuries, it just doesn't feel like the likelihood is that your starting quarterback is going to be able to make 17 starts. So you need somebody that you feel like can at least keep you in games, or in Malik Willis's case, win you games when your starter is down. Jimmy Garoppolo, could he be that guy? So Jimmy Garoppolo was backing up Matthew Stafford in L.A. for the last couple of years. I mean, if I could show you the way I just spelled Garoppolo as a Google search to see what his contract was last year, he's 34 years old. I guess he was in New England for a long time behind Brady. And then he tried the New England thing. That didn't really work out. Then he was in San Francisco. He was the starting quarterback on that 2021 team that won in the snow in Lambeau because of the Packers special teams. You lost to Jimmy Garoppolo that day. And he's been backing up in L.A. ever since. I spelled his last name in a speed version of his name. I spelled it Garraoaalo. How many vowels can we put in this thing? Google figured it out, though. Sometimes I'll misspell something on the blog so badly that even Word and even the internet are like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. I have no idea what this word could possibly be. That's how you know you've really defeated the machines. When you spell something so poorly, even they just shrug and say, I don't know what you're trying to do here. Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's see what the contract was for last year. What do you think Malik's going to get? I think Malik's going to get 10 a year, 15 a year. I don't think it's going to be something crazy where he's getting paid $40 or $50 million a year, maybe 20 a year. So Garoppolo was on 1 year, $3 million deal. Yeah, sign him. Sign him. He's got a great jawline. He's been fine enough. I think under Matt LaFleur, if Jimmy Garoppolo is your backup quarterback and he has to make 2 starts, you probably go 1-1. You might go 2-0 in those starts, depending on who the opponent is. I'm fine with that. 34-year-old Jimmy Garoppolo. Jeremy Fowler reported that on ESPN that the Packers may have some interest there in bringing in Garoppolo. And another quick NFL tidbit, just a former Packer bit of news. Aaron Jones, the Vikings informed him that he will either be cut or traded by the time the new league year starts this weekend. I don't know, there's probably not going to be a reunion there at this point. He was okay last year. He was really good in his first year in Minnesota, had a career high in rushing yards. I think he was just short of 1,200 yards and had another 400 or 500 through the air. really good in that 1 year with Sam Darnold. Last year, not as good. Injuries undermined him a bit. I think he had 500 yards on the ground and maybe 300 more in the air. But it does kind of look like, life comes at you fast as a running back in the NFL, especially for a guy who dealt with some injuries, who's not the biggest guy in the world. But I think we all loved Aaron Jones and the production and obviously all the big games that he had throughout his career in Green Bay. What a find that was. That was one of Ted Thompson's last gems in the draft when he had both him and Jamal Williams in that same draft class. I don't even think Jamal Williams is in the league anymore. But Aaron Jones was a find, right? In the 4th or 5th round, I want to say that they got him, and he turns into a franchise back there for about 4 or 5 years, maybe even more. It sounds like he is going to be a free agent when the new league year starts this weekend. All right, that's all the NFL stuff. Let's just do the Bucks thing. Where's my snip, snap? Yesterday was the worst. That was one of the worst losses I think I have ever seen. And I've watched a lot of bad Bucks teams, guys. I mean, the whole 90s, that was bad. We had the 1 year in 2001. Then we had the Andrew Bogut years where they were kind of battling for 8 seeds. The Brandon Jennings years. Finally, you get this unicorn in Giannis, and things have been great for a decade. And now he's been hurt, and it's their third version of this team around Giannis. He hasn't been out there. Yesterday was one of the worst losses I've ever seen when you get the full context of it. Now, they've had a lot of bad losses this year. They have lost 3 games to the Washington Wizards, who have, 14 or 15 wins this year. They lost by 45 points to Brooklyn at one point on the road, and the Nets have 16, 17 wins on the year. So this has been a year defined by bad losses to bad teams. Yesterday might have taken the cake, though. So you lose the game we talked about on the Friday podcast. They were coming off of the wins, back-to-back wins against Miami and Cleveland. And I said on Friday, those are pretty good wins. Miami's not a championship contender, but they're above 500. They're a playoff team, and the Bucks have not notched a lot of wins against teams of that caliber, and they did on Tuesday. And then Cleveland, right now, the betting favorites to win the East. Yes, they didn't have Harden, Mitchell, or Evan Mobley out there. I get it, but you still won that game. And that was when on Friday we played the snip, snap. On Friday when we were recording the podcast, this team was within 5 games of 500. They were 1 game out of a play-in tournament spot. And then what did I say on Friday? It doesn't make any sense at this point to tank because you have 26 wins, and the teams that are the dregs of the league that are on the bottom tier have 14 wins, 15 wins, 16 wins. At this point, you're not going to catch them and threaten to be in the top 5 pick range. You're probably now going to be in the top 10 or maybe top 11, 12, or 13. You're never going to catch those teams. If the Bucks had just continued to lose after that loss to Boston on the 1st of February, and that was their low water mark. After that game, they were 11 games under 500. And on the Monday podcast that next day, we said we are full Panzer mode. We are full tank mode. If they had just lost or kept losing or maybe only won a game or two since then, they only had 19, 20 wins on the year, then we're talking about a team that is still on target for maybe a top 5 or 6 pick in the draft. But then they come back from that Boston game. They win 3 games heading into the deadline. Then they keep Giannis. Then they win 8 of 10 after that win against Cleveland last Wednesday. That was 8 of 10. And they're a game out, and Giannis is coming back, and all of a sudden it kind of feels like, okay, you might get in the play-in tournament. You might get a playoff spot yet this year. Then on Friday, they get blown out by the Knicks, 127-98. I'm not losing any sleep over that game. I was calling a game when that game was happening. I was kind of watching it. Jalen Brunson went nuts. The Knicks are fully healthy. They're a top 3 team. The Knicks are a better team than the Bucks, even if you had Giannis. Even if Giannis had suffered no injury, he was a full go, full scale on Friday. There's a chance you lose that game by 20-plus anyway. The Knicks are a bad matchup for the Bucks, even with Giannis in the last couple of years. So you lose that game by almost 30 or more, or 29. You get blown out. When I put my head on my pillow Friday night, I am not losing any sleep over that. That's a really good team. You don't have your superstar out there, whatever. You lost that game, and you're 26-32. Then you get to yesterday. The Chicago Bulls, a once proud organization. The Chicago Bulls are basically the Herb Cole Bucks now. Basically all they do is hover around 500 and are either in the play-in tournament or they're the last seed in the playoffs, and they're out in the first round. But whatever. That's about what they've been doing now for the last 10 years post Derrick Rose. Now this year, they were in the play-in tournament for a lot of the schedule, and then they traded all their assets at the deadline, and now they are actively tanking. Now, they're also in a weird spot where they have, I think, 25 wins or 25 wins coming out of yesterday. So they're in a similar spot as the Bucks. They're one spot behind the Bucks in the standings where they're never going to catch the bottom-tier teams. But I guess if you just keep losing, maybe they get a top 7 or top 8 pick in the draft. But this is a team that is making no illusions about the fact that they are tanking and they want to lose games. So now, even with that loss on Friday, you go to Chicago yesterday afternoon, and at that point, the Bucks are a game and a half or 2 games out of a play-in tournament spot, but you're thinking at that point, okay, we're kind of going to try to do this now. And the Bucks rip off a 21-2 run late second quarter, take a 15-point halftime lead. Okay, you got blown out on Friday, so what? You're up by 15. The Bulls had lost going into yesterday. The Bulls had lost 11 consecutive games. Their losing streak goes to 11. And I don't think they had won since the trade deadline, and there's a chance they did not win a game in the month of February. That's how much they're tanking right now. So you are up 66-51 on a team that is begging you to beat it. Please beat us. We don't want to win games anymore. And then the Bucks in the third quarter give the lead back. You lead by 2 entering the fourth quarter, 89-87. Okay, I've seen this team blow leads before. It's the NBA. They went cold. Bulls got hot. Whatever. Just find a way to win this game. You have a 2-point lead going into the fourth quarter against a team that doesn't want to win. Find a way to win this game. And then the Bucks put together what I would say is one of the worst offensive quarters I have ever seen. Pick any quarter from 1995. Pick any quarter from 2013 when they won 15 games. Pick any quarter from any year that I've watched all of these games. I have never seen something like what I saw on Sunday in the fourth quarter. This team missed 17 consecutive shots. Let that sink in like the rum is sinking into the rum cake that I'm eating before these podcasts. Let that soak into the back part of your membrane. They missed 17 straight shots. I have never seen that in an NBA game in my life. I see that sometimes when I call games at the D2 or D3 level in college. You'll often see teams go on bad streaks, not even really to that level, but I've seen teams. I called a game over the weekend where a team did not make a shot in the third quarter in a women's college game. I've called men's games this year where a team goes 1 for 15 in a given part of the half. I have very rarely seen 17 straight misses. And then you figure at the NBA level where even the worst players on an NBA team, even Thanasis, if you gave him 17 shots in an NBA game in a row, he'd probably make 4 or 5 of them, even if they're contested. These are elite shot makers. These are the best of the best. 0 for 17. They did not get their first field goal in the fourth quarter until the 3-minute, 10-second mark remaining. From 12 minutes to 3:10, they didn't score a single field goal, and the Bulls turned a 2-point deficit into a 20-point lead, and it was curtains. And the Bulls end up winning 120-97. The Bucks at one point led by 16 and lost by 23. I'm not even mad. That's extraordinary. This is eat a block of cheese and poop in the refrigerator. How can you even be mad? I've never seen anything like it. They did get decent looks. They just weren't going down. I've just never seen an NBA team get in that kind of an offensive funk. They were Philip Seymour Hoffman, and along came Polly. Rain dance. They just couldn't make anything. And Doc said post-game, which, by the way, they still need to fire Doc. And I know we haven't been beating that drum as much because they have been winning. I want to be on record right now, even when they were winning 8 out of 10, even when it seemed like things were going a little bit better, they still need to move on from Doc at the end of the year because, again, like we said, and I'm almost certain I said this on Friday, even with winning 8 out of 10, and even with, at that point, things looking like they were going in a better direction, my feeling was the ceiling on this team is, at best, you win a couple of play-in tournament games, you get the 8th seed, and you get beat by the Pistons in the first round. So the ceiling on this team right now is an 8th seed and out in the first round. And that's not going to be enough to convince Giannis to sign the Supermax extension in October. You're going to have to rework a lot of things still in the offseason, but at least you would hit the offseason with a little bit of momentum. So regardless, though, of whether they got to that or whether we're back into tanking after the way they looked yesterday, they need to move on from Doc. And whether that means, I know at this point they're not going to this year, but at the end of the year, Doc needs to he needs to step down. What's the Versace? He needs to step down. If you don't want to call it a firing, if you don't want to call it a retiring, if you want to fail him upwards and send him to the front office and make him some kind of assistant to the player personnel director so he can make it look like it's an upgrade, like he's moving up instead of being told to go away. However you need to make it look aesthetically, do it. Because even with the winning 8 out of 10 and kind of getting this thing going in the right direction, you still need to move on from him at the end of the year. I don't know if the players quit on him. I saw some of that discussion on Twitter because they looked so bad. It logically leads to the idea from some fans that, oh, they've quit on Doc. They've tuned Doc out. And that all may be true. But like I said, a lot of the looks they got in that over 17 streak were not terrible looks. They just weren't hitting them. I've just never seen anything like that in my life of watching a billion NBA. I mean, I've watched thousands of NBA games. I've never seen anything like that quarter. And you end up losing to a team that does not want to win, and you end up losing to a team that had lost 11 games in a row. And at this point, you just don't have any room for error. And I know sometimes I saw some takes on Twitter that, these quarters happen, and even in the NBA, even by that standard, it's still crazy, 0-17. But sometimes you have a quarter and you're just not hitting field goals consistently enough and you lose a game that you shouldn't lose. But the Bucks have put themselves in a spot now where you just can't have that. I mean, you have no room for error to lose a game like they lost on Sunday to the Bulls. So they fall to 26-33, so we're back to 7 games under 500. And now the Hornets and Hawks have been winning. So now the Bucks are 3 games back of a play-in tournament spot behind Charlotte, and they are 2 back in the loss column of both the Hawks and Hornets, who are the 9 and 10 seeds right now. You have to get to the 10th seed just to get a chance in the play-in tournament, and the Bucks are now 3 games out of that. They were 1 game out on Friday. Now they're 3 games out, and I'm starting to get concerned that they are going to be in the worst possible situation, and that is middling it. And if you're a gambler, you know what middling it is, and middling it is about the worst possible scenario for gambling for a professional sports team, because if they are the first team out of the play-in tournament, so they end in 11th place in the Eastern Conference, not only are you not going to get a top 10 pick, you're also not going to make the playoffs. So we went from tanking for a top 5 pick to now trying to get in the playoffs, and they might not get either. They might not get a top 10 pick or make the playoffs because of the way this has gone. Now, tonight, they have the Celtics at Fiserv Forum. How are they going to win this game? I don't know. The Celtics have been very surprising. No Jason Tatum this year. Tatum blew out his Achilles like half the league, it felt like, did last year. Tatum blew out his Achilles in the playoffs last year. He was supposed to miss the entire year. It does kind of sound like he's trending towards coming back. They trade away Drew Holiday. They finally jettison Al Horford. And it kind of felt like this was going to be a transition year for the Celtics, where they knew they didn't have their superstar in Tatum. And they've got 2 superstars. They've got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Both are superstars. But you knew you weren't going to have half of that tandem. And then you trade away Holiday and you trade away Horford and you make some moves on the periphery. And it kind of felt like this was going to be a gap year for the Celtics until they get Tatum back next year. Well, Jaylen Brown is playing out of his mind, and they are the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. With no Jason Tatum, they are 40-20 on the year, the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And they beat Philly last night, so they are also coming off of back-to-back. I don't know how the Bucks bounce back. I guess maybe it's a good way or a good thing that they play right away again after what happened on Sunday. Bobby Portis talked about that postgame. It's a good thing we have a game in 48 hours or in 24 hours because you don't want to sit with that one too long. But I don't think it's likely the Bucks win tonight against a 40-20 Celtics team that's had their number for the last 4 or 5 years. And if you lose this game, now you're all the way back to 8 games under 500. Now, this would be very Bucks. It would be very 20-25-26 Bucks to lose to a tanking team in horrible fashion on Sunday and then beat a team that is the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference on Monday less than 24 or a little more than 24 hours later. That would be very Bucks. This does start a 5-game homestand, as we talked about last week. That Bulls road game yesterday was the only road game sandwiched in between 9 home games. The Bucks went 2-2 on the first 4 home games last year, lost to Toronto, lost to New York, beat Miami and Cleveland. Now you've got 5 in a row at home. Boston tonight, Atlanta, which is a team right in front of you on Wednesday. That feels like a must-win. Then you've got a tanking Utah team on Saturday, Orlando Sunday, and Phoenix, who has been a surprisingly good team, next week Tuesday. But 5 home games before you hit the road with Miami and Atlanta at the end of next week. I don't know, 3-2? If you can go 3-2 on these 5 games, maybe you keep your head above water, especially if you can get that win against Atlanta on Wednesday. Maybe you're back to within a game or a game and a half of that 10 seed by the time you get to the end of the week. But it just continues to be a theme this year of being absolutely confounded by what this team is, what their goals are, what are we trying to do. It doesn't seem like they have any idea themselves. Just an ugly, ugly loss yesterday at Chicago. Now, let's wrap up on college basketball on a more positive note, shall we? Let me do this one more time. It's the first podcast of March. Oh, yeah. It hits every time. So the Badgers got a big win Saturday. They stayed on the West Coast after that ugly loss to Oregon Wednesday night. They were at Washington. What did they say? Their first game at Washington. And you're going to get this now with these Pac-12 teams or the old Pac-12 teams, the West Coast teams that are in the Big Ten. The Badgers had not played at Washington since, 1956 or something like that? So they were at Washington on Saturday, as we discussed on the Friday podcast. After looking as bad as they looked on Wednesday against Oregon, against a big 3 wins in the Big Ten, a team that was 3-13 in conference on Wednesday. You lost by 14. You had to find a way to split those 2 games at Oregon Wednesday, at Washington Saturday, and they were able to do that. By the way, Detlef Schrempf got his jersey retired at halftime of that game against the Huskies on Saturday. Detlef looks good. Detlef used to make some bit appearances on Parks and Rec. What was Tom Haverford's entertainment company? Entertainment 950 or something like that? Let's do another edition of John Google's things during the show. Tom Haverford, Entertainment 720. Remember they had Detlef Schrempf would make some bit appearances on that show? And Detlef Schrempf was a part of the greatest NBA Jam team ever. In any version of that arcade game, the Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, Detlef Schrempf trio was almost unbeatable, to the point where if you were playing the game against a buddy and you were doing a non-randomized version, like sometimes if you did, click random, each player clicks random, and then whatever you end up with, sometimes you'd end up with the Sonics, and even though you knew it was an unfair advantage, you went random, so we knew those were the rules. If you had somebody that actively picked the Sonics against you in an NBA Jam game, boot that person to the sun. You should not be allowed to pick that team in that game if you're picking it on your own volition. But they retired Detlef's number, and a lot of those guys, Kemp was in town, Payton was in town for that, so that was kind of a fun thing at halftime on Saturday. But Braden Carrington went ballistic on Saturday, had a great game again from Nick Boyd, and Nolan Winter was good, but the story became Braden Carrington the second half. He couldn't miss from distance. He hit 9 threes, a school record 9 threes he drilled, scored 32 points off the bench. He has done similar things this year, not to that level, obviously, a school record. But he has had some games this year where he's knocked down 4, 5, and I think with 1.6 threes. He's only averaging 9 points a game or 8.5 points a game, but he gives you a good scoring boost off the bench. And Braden Carrington is one of those guys to me that in a tournament game, in a Big Ten tournament game next week, or an NCAA tournament game in a couple of weeks, he is one of those March guys that I could see randomly getting on a heater and just being lights out and scoring 20 points in an opening round game, or scoring 20 points or 25 points in a round of 32 game where you're nip and tuck, you're back and forth, and all of a sudden Braden bleeping Carrington, like that would be the opposing team fans' perspective. Who is this Braden Carrington? That he has that vibe to him. But he knocked down 9 threes, 9 of 15 from distance, and the Badgers rout the Huskies 90-73, a win they needed to get after how they looked at Oregon on Wednesday. So they are another 20-win year for Greg Gard. Do we fire Gard? Nope. A tough day for the fire Gard crowd on Saturday. They are 20-9, 12-6 in Big Ten play. 2 games left in the regular season. Are the new rankings out right now? They're not going to be. I just want to see if Purdue's still in the top 10. I think these are new. Week 17. Yeah, it's got to be. Ooh, Wisconsin is the first team out on both of these. Are these new? Duke is the number 1. No, these aren't new. The new rankings, I think Duke will stay number 1. The new rankings will be out in an hour or so. So anyway, the Badgers have 2 games left on the schedule, regular season. They've got Maryland. Maryland only has 4 conference wins. And while I know we just talked about Oregon, there's a difference between playing a 4-win conference team at home on senior night and going to the West Coast and playing a 10 p.m. tip time. I do not have any concern right now for that game, knock on wood. I have no concern right now for the Maryland game on Wednesday. I think the Badgers will win that one fairly handily, and that will be 21 wins. And then they go to Purdue. Right now, Purdue is the 8th-ranked team in the country. Did they lose a game this week? Oh, they lost 2 games this week. Yeah, they're not going to be in the top 10 anymore. They'll be top 25 still. They'll probably be in the late teens, I would think. They lost at home to Michigan State, and then they lost at Ohio State. Everyone was freaking out about that loss at Ohio State. Well, Purdue lost there this weekend. They lost by 8. So they are now 22-7. They're also 12-6. So Purdue and the Badgers tied right now. God, could Wisconsin still get a double bye? They might. The Badgers are only a game back of Illinois, who they have the tiebreaker with, and that is you need to be in the top 4 to get the double bye. Right now, the Badgers are firmly in the single bye category for the Big Ten tournament. Yeah, they're only a game back of Illinois for that double bye. Okay, that's still on the table. So the Badgers have Maryland on Wednesday, and then at Purdue on Saturday then, right? 3-7, yeah. And the Big Ten tournament starts next week. If you can get a win on Wednesday, which you should, and then if you get another quality road win at Purdue, a notoriously brutal place to play, especially for the Badgers, if you can get those 2 wins and then you win a handful of games in the Big Ten tournament, I think we're still in the conversation for maybe a 5 seed come NCAA tournament time. Even with the win on Saturday, like we discussed on Friday, my feeling is this team is still kind of in that 8 range, that 7, 8, 9 range, probably in the 8. Right now, if they came out right now, I think they would be an 8 seed. Is there new bracketology out right now? Updated. Oh, no, there's not. There's one coming in yet today. Where are the Badgers on this one? This was on Saturday before. So before Saturday's result, Lenardi had them as a 7 seed. All right, so they're probably still 7 seed, I would think, coming out of Saturday. Yeah, if you can beat Maryland and then you get a road win at Purdue, and if you can win a game then or 2 in the Big Ten tournament, yeah, they might be a 6. They might be a 6, 5, 6, somewhere in there. You lose a couple of those games, you're probably going to be a 7, 8, 9. Or right now a 7. That was before the win at Washington. I don't think they'll move up after that win, but that will solidify them on the 7 line, I would think, on Lenardi's bracketology. That was a nice bounce-back win, one you felt like you had to get, and now you've got Maryland at home on Wednesday, at Purdue on Saturday. Marquette lost again yesterday. I mean, just an awful year. Shaka's got to adjust what his approach is for the NIL. Shaka, as I think we went over at some point, Shaka Smart has been reluctant to take part in the NIL era. He still wants to build teams the traditional way and bring in guys, recruit guys, have them stay for 3 or 4 years, start on the bench, build up the credibility, build up the skill set. That's just not the way this works anymore. Now, you can have a blend of that, I think, and I think Greg Gard has done that, where guys like Nolan Winter, guys like John Blackwell, they've been with the program 2-3 years now, maybe 4 years for Winter. And then you supplement that by getting a John Tonje, by getting a Nick Boyd, by going out and getting Braden Carrington. And you can kind of go a 60-40 ratio almost, or a 70-30 ratio. Shaka is still trying to do it 100% recruit and build every year. And that's just not how this works anymore. And I think he's admitted that. They lost to DePaul at home 62-51 yesterday, so they are 10-19, and they have 4 conference wins, I think. And I think he did reluctantly admit a few weeks ago, yeah, we're going to have to examine everything in the offseason. I did not think they'd have a year like this under Shaka. When they hired Shaka Smart, and he's been way more good than bad. They won conference a few years ago. He was the Big East Coach of the Year, I think twice maybe. It just felt like they weren't going to have a year like this where they're going to end up being a bottom feeder in the Big East and maybe winning 11 games on the year. And that's where they're at right now. Another home loss to DePaul on Wednesday. Any Brewer stuff this week? There isn't a whole lot going on. The Brewers lost yesterday. They've lost a couple of games in a row. World Baseball Classic starts with pool play this week. So the Brewers have a couple of days off on Monday, Tuesday, today and Tuesday. And then I think they take on Great Britain on Wednesday because all the WBC teams, that's why I think there's a 2-day layover now or layoff now for a lot of teams because all of the players that are going to be participating in the World Baseball Classic, they are joining those teams today and tomorrow. Like Bryce Terang is on Team USA. And Andrew Fisher, the rising third base prospect for the Brewers, hit a home run over the weekend. I think he's on Great Britain's team. So the Brewers will take on the British team on Wednesday, and then pool play starts Wednesday for some teams, and I think Thursday. I think the Americans play their first pool play game on Thursday night live on Fox. But kind of a slow baseball weekend. No moves to be made of, and I don't think there was anything really noteworthy over the weekend. Trevor McGill made his debut yesterday in spring. He had a scoreless inning. So they're just kind of making their way through it right now, and I'm pretty sure most teams have some downtime here either today or tomorrow or both, as some of the players around the league are getting set for World Baseball Classic play. That'll do it for us here on your Monday morning, and as we discussed, I think Wednesday, pretty sure Wednesday, not sure what time it'll drop, but you will get a second podcast this week because there will be no podcast next week as I am on vacation in Phoenix. So we'll chat with you later in the week. Have a happy, safe work week. We'll chat with you then, and by then I mean at some point.